Good evening and welcome to Artist Talk on Art, Monday, April 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm Alex Cohen, Programming Director of Artist Talk on Art. Tonight's panel is between artist Anonda Bell, Nancy Cohen, and Shari Mendelson, moderated by ATOA's Doug Shear. Artist Talk on Art is the world's longest running art panel forum in art history. Founded in 1974, ATOA has held and recorded over 1,200 events in audio and video, featuring more than 9,000 artists and other art professionals. All ATOA events are recorded, copyrighted, and then posted to our YouTube channel at Artist Talk on Art 2026. Please hold your questions or comments until the last part of our 90-minute event and remain muted until that time. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the panelists. Shari Mendelson is a sculptor living and working in Brooklyn and upstate New York. Her sculptures are influenced by Roman, Greek, Islamic, and Mesopotamian art and are constructed primarily from found plastic bottles. Mendelson has been a recipient of numerous grants and awards, including a John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation grant and 4 New York Foundation for the Arts fellowships. Mendelssohn's work is in the permanent collection of the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, the Carnegie Museum of Art, and the Toledo Museum of Art, as well as the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, Texas, the R.I.S.D Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and the Museum of Old and New in Australia. Anonda Bell is an Australian-born, New York, New Jersey-based artist and curator. Trained as a painter and printmaker, she works primarily with paper-based installation. Her work addresses themes of feminism, the environment, psychology, and a quest to seek social narratives and stories about individuals which have been overlooked or suppressed. She is the director and chief curator of the Paul Robeson Galleries at Rutgers University. Bell's work engages with notions of human psychology, the motivations, desires, and innate qualities of the human mind. The work is interdisciplinary, referencing things such as psychology, history, anthropology, and science. Nancy Cohen's work is handmade paper and glass that shows the relation to the environment and the human body. Recent exhibitions include Nancy Cohen, The State We're In at Catherine Markle Fine Arts, new acquisitions at the New Jersey State Museum, Legacies in Paper at the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking, and Sculpting with Paper, Hand Papermaking at the Turchin Center for Visual Arts. In September 2026, Nancy Cohen and Anna Booth will have a collaborative exhibition at Urban Glass in Brooklyn, New York. Douglas Shear is an artist, writer, and impresario.
Impresario.
Impresario. The only child of 2 artist parents who were part of the Artists Union and WPA projects and Hoffman students. He has been a painter since the 1950s. After art school, he became one of the earliest video art pioneers. He was a co-founder in 1974 of Artist Talk on Art, which he is our current president, and has moderated panels and participated in many dozens of ATOA events for ATOA. His writings have appeared in magazines in over 80 countries and 13 languages, and he have been seen in the Brooklyn Rail. He was preservationist and archivist at the ATOA archive. And now I'll hand it over to them.
Let me suggest, if possible, we go alphabetically, and Anonda, you would begin.
Okay. So, will my PowerPoint be?
Yeah, I'll share it right now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you everybody for coming to hear this conversation tonight. I am choosing to focus on work specifically that's more recent work in the last few years, when I've been looking a lot at the human body within an ecosystem and also within the world at large from a philosophical and physiological point of view. Tonight I'm going to just walk through this process through a series of works to give you a bit of a taste of what I've been exploring. Some of the terms I'm going to use relate to high, fine visual arts kind of discourse. Others relate to science, and I'm talking about symbiosis, contamination, evolution, and conservation of matter. One of the things that I'm trying to do is kind of draw parallels between the work of an artist and the work of a scientist, and a common impulse, which is one which is to have ideas, to be curious about the world at large, and then to look at different ways to explore these ideas through a series of actions, whatever they may be, in an environment, which could be a laboratory or a field or somewhere else that you may choose. I think the main difference between these two practices, which I think about a lot, is that a scientist tends to have quite a specific and ever more specific focal point for their attention, in that they're trying to test one hypothesis and limit the number of variables that they're testing within any given moment. Whereas an artist, we have the liberty to be very expansive, and we can explore as many different things simultaneously in linear and non-linear ways, which keeps it very interesting. I'll start with this work, which is one from a few years ago, but I think it gives a good sense of where I'm focusing now, which is using the human body as a landscape, the human body as a philosophical space, as a psychological space, and using it to explore different ideas about the specific species that we are, which is Homo sapiens or humans. The thing that I'm fighting against most of the time is the idea that we are a human and that's what we are, when in actual fact we're an ecosystem, and many creatures dwell within us and on us and gestate in us and use us as a source of food. And this particular work just looks at different creatures that are on the outside of the skin or burrow into the skin. So they're all things that live on pretty much everybody: bacteria, lice, mites, all different kinds of things. So this work kind of is a good starting point. Next slide. Thank you. So this work is trying to break down the barriers between inside and outside. And one of the ways that I'm exploring these ideas is looking at ideas about biophobia. So being fearful or reticent or uncomfortable in the natural world, in environments that are not strictly controlled by humans or created by humans. And this work looks at ways of breaking down the boundary between us and other creatures. I imagine a future world that I'm calling the Intermecene, which is based on insects, where humans are not the dominant species anymore. And in fact, insects, who are incredibly abundant, are the dominant species. And humans are being put in an environment where we must decide if we are to capitulate to the new dominant ruling class, or we can hide from them, or we can work out different ways to assimilate. And one of the ways that we may choose to assimilate is to infest ourselves and to become partly insect. So this work here is like a voting station, you could say. On the surface that you see there, the shelf, there's actually a crystal bowl, and in the bowl are little bags, and in each bag is a gelatin capsule with an insect inside. And the idea is that you could ingest this insect and your body will naturally start to break it down, and it will become part of you. So literally you are becoming partially insect. Next slide. This is an example of the work actually functioning. I had the good fortune to show it at 14C, and I had a number of people that were more than keen to infest themselves with these little bug-like capsules. Everybody was fine. They were, I just want to stress that they were produced in a facility and intended to be consumed by humans, so it was not an unsafe thing to do. And the next slide just shows you some of the gelatin capsules as I was preparing them. Thank you for doing the slides. So these ones have little mealworms in them, but I had a range of different insects. Next slide. This work here is another work in this series based on the idea of the Intermecene. And this one is looking at a strategy for assimilation, which kind of draws on metamorphosis and transforming into a creature which you are not. And in this case, that particular story was influential to me because it relates a little bit to the immigrant experience in the way that when you come to another country, you can decide how much of your original culture or your home culture you bring with you and how much you choose to adapt new rituals, customs, ways of living, ways of existing, ways of eating, and how much you choose to hang on to. In this case, I've created, and if we can go to the next slide, I've created a form of armor which is based on the hardened shells, wing covers of an insect. So this is an armor that is literally made out of insect wings as a form of assimilating to a new culture and trying to ingratiate yourself and appear to be one of the new people. Next slide. This work was originally a video, but is not anymore. But basically, one of the things that I've tried to do with my work throughout the years, speaking in art history terms, one of the things that is frequently the case is the female body has been used as a kind of tabula rasa onto which many people have inscribed many different meanings. So it's been a point of interest for me to continue to use my own body as a source body because I know that I have consent, I'm giving consent, and I also like the idea that my body is changing over time. It is aging, and as it ages, it changes the way that I'm thinking about the body as I represent it in art and then the body as I exist in it on the planet. So this is actually a video where I underwent a scanning process. I was scanned to create a three-dimensional model which I then used for sequential works. And if we could go to the next slide after this one. These, after I made a model of myself, I was then able to make various kind of more traditional forms of using it. I did a slip cast form, and then I did not want to create something that was a beautiful, perfect replica or a portrait of myself. I was more interested in it as a generic idea for a female body rather than my body specifically. And one of the things that I'm looking at in this work is kind of the idea of the body melting and disappearing and decaying visibly in front of us. So this is a ceramic work on wood, and these are puddles made out of bioplastic that are kind of dripping off the form. And the next slide, please. This work relates to Darwin's Origin of Species, and specifically the idea that there's a linear progression from one form of a creature to another form, and we're gradually progressing to reach this pinnacle of, so-called perfection. And usually, of course, it is a male form that is at the top of the pile. So what I've taken here is I've taken the female form as a starting point. And instead of us becoming more and more separate and distinct from earlier relatives of the same kind of species, I've taken it that our next point of progression into the future would be us becoming more and more assimilated with the natural world. So less a specific boundary and more nebulous and more ingratiated with different kinds of creatures, the ones that we actually already exist with, and then potential other creatures. Next slide. And so that's a very scientific origin story. This is a more biblical origin story. These are portraits that I created of Lilith and Eve. If we could go to the next slide. So this is my portrait of Lilith, and Lilith is or was a character that has been used in many different cultures, a number of different religions, and she has various kind of attributes. And one of them is that she's associated with demons, death of children, and general disobedience. She was thought by some to be the first wife of Adam, and her lack of subservience led to her being exited out of that story, and she was then replaced by Eve. This work is created with ceramics, and then it's wrapped with the shed skin of a snake. So when a snake increases in scale, it has to shed its skin because it doesn't have the capacity to grow otherwise. So this figure is entwined in the snake. Next slide, please. And this is my version of Eve. So Eve, again, is a slipcast figure with a void over the abdomen, and she has been created with a cascading kind of array of the ribs of snakes. So it's kind of a little bit of a humorous work, but then also trying to bring in biomaterials that are not traditionally associated with art, even though ceramics is obviously one of the most fundamental and enduring media and materials that artists have used. Next slide, please. So again, touching on ideas of the singular existence of any particular creature. These two works are working with entities that grow and exist in a complementary way with one another. Darwin's Origin of the Species was based on kind of like a battle scenario. So there are creatures that are superior and more suited for their environment, and they battle and they win the right to exist, and they consume all of the resources, and they then get to ensure that they continue throughout time as they get to reproduce. I'm kind of interested in looking at different ways that it's not an adversarial relationship, but more of a symbiotic relationship. On the image on the left, I have a figure which has lichen growing on it, which is two creatures existing simultaneously to form a cohesive whole, which is able to exist and grow within certain environments. And on the right, I have a figure which has a number of different substances: raw clay, brown cardboard, and then millet seed. And the white fluffy stuff is mycelium, which is the root-like structure of fungus. And this mycelium is like the star of this work and is literally growing into the clay and then connecting all the other elements of the work together. If we could do the next slide. So one of the things that I've had the good fortune to do in the last few years is go to the School of Visual Arts and participate in their bioart laboratory, which I have found to be profoundly wonderful and certainly given me a lot of inspiration, and also the capacity to have some basic laboratory skills. This work is my figure suspended on stilts, and in the video work, I'm pouring agar over the figure in a fume hood. So the idea is that I'm creating a fertile surface for the figure that I will then use as a substrate to grow other creatures on. If we could go to the next slide. And this is the resulting work. Try to imagine the one on the left is rotating around, but this is a figure which I used to grow slime mold. So there's some vaguely yellowy parts of the work, and on the figure on the left you can kind of see a vein-like network. Slime mold is not actually a fungus, but it's a material that is thought to have elements of behavior that we recognize as intelligence. Again, that's a very human-centric term, but slime mold grows, and my intention with this work is to encourage the slime mold to inhabit the form, and I did so by incentivizing it with food, which is common to pretty much all creatures, and so it has oats embedded in the agar, and the slime mold started to grow. However, as is common with many bioart and sci-art projects, if we could go to the next slide, I encountered circumstances where there were things growing that I had not intended. So the interesting thing I find about my work is that I have the opportunity to grow something and care for something and literally bring something into existence. But unfortunately, this sometimes goes astray, and the figure on the left was supposed to be growing in mycelium, and I ended up with some unidentified mold. And because I don't know what it is, it's called wild mold, and unfortunately you have to kill it. So this is me killing something instead of growing something. It's the mold on the left, which is gorgeous. And then what I had to do was put the whole thing in a bleach bath and kill it. So this is a death scene. If we could go to the next.
So, Anonda, I hate
Yeah.
to break the mold,
Yes.
but how many more slides do you have, do you think?
I can finish on this one if you like.
Please.
Okay, so this is my, actually, Next slide, we'll go down, we'll skip this one. This is a work that I created that is called a double Daphne portrait. So it's a portrait of Daphne, who's a mythological creature, female, who sought to avoid unwanted amorous attention. And the way that she did so was by transforming herself into a plant. So this work I created out of ceramics, which I then grew seed, and then I use that as a format to actually pull a root picture of her. So the image on the left is the ceramic mold, and then it's the root picture that I've pulled from the mold. The one in the middle is actually a video of me pulling, and the one on the right is just a detail of the hand showing how the roots have become part of my drawing.
Thank you, Anonda. Let's go to Nancy Cohen. You need to unmute yourself, I think, Nancy.
I was saying that was amazing, Anonda.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So I generally work across various media, drawing, sculpture, and installation. For the last 30 years, waterways, especially the rivers in New Jersey, have been very influential in my work. So the top half of this is Mill Creek.
Do other people see this? Do other people see Nancy's work?
Not yet, no.
Oh, okay, so something's wrong. Thank you, Shari. Do you see it now?
No.
No.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Are you hitting the share? Are you hitting share?
I think maybe I didn't hit share. That's okay. I got to go back. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
And then you should see a green border, or I do on my computer.
Whoops, now I've lost everything. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay, let's see, go back to the Zoom. I might have gone straight to the PowerPoint without the share, sorry. All right, let's do share. PowerPoint, now my PowerPoint's not here. Okay.
You need to start your PowerPoint first and then hit share.
Mm-hmm.
Just I had it before, that's all.
Okay.
Can you see it now?
No.
Oh, shit. Excuse me.
Do you want me to go while Nancy figures it
Sure.
out?
Thanks, Shari.
Would that help?
All right, we'll do that. Shari, please
Okay.
jump in.
Well, hopefully mine will work. We'll see.
Okay. Okay, that's sharing.
Okay, let me just turn it into a view as a slideshow. Okay. Okay, so I am going to start with a couple of group images, and then I'm going to talk more specifically about some of the individual pieces and how they came to be and what I was thinking about and how I make them. But the first thing to talk about is that they're mainly made from recycled plastic. And as Doug was asking earlier, I don't cast them. I just find the convex and concave shapes within the plastic bottles. And then I cut them apart, hot glue them together, and then go over those seams with a moldable epoxy called Magic Sculpt. And I thought that this would be a good place to start. Let me just move this. A good place to start because you can see like my work table on the left. So usually I start with a drawing, as we were saying, as we were in the beginning of this presentation before we got going, was I will often find something either in a book or in a museum that that I find fascinating, and then I will take a picture of it or I'll find it on the internet, and then I'll have that intermediary place where I'll do drawings of it. And then as I'm working, I try and emulate the drawing, although as you can see in the piece on the right, then sometimes the piece takes over and things go off in their own direction. And for me, usually that's the interesting place where something else happens that takes me away from either the original piece or the original drawing, and then the piece becomes something on its own. So that drawing that you're seeing was, oh, no, I can't. Go forward. That drawing is was based on this Loristan bronze cheek piece. And these cheek pieces are were made to, they're a horse bit. So in ancient Loristan, they would have these bronze pieces that would sit on the side of the horse's face, and the bit that goes through the center was in the horse's mouth. So the hole that I've been very interested in as a visual element really comes from this bit piece in the middle. And then I've used that hole a lot more as a just as a visual element within the piece, giving air through the piece, and well, you'll see some more of those. I've, in a general idea that I had when I started making this work was thinking about, I've always had an interest in ancient art, but thinking about who were the people that made this work, and like what happened to those civilizations, what happened to those people that that made this piece, and how different cultures, different countries, they have a really strong presence and then they dissipate, and thinking, why does that happen to one country and, and not to another? And I started this whole body of work in 2008, pretty much. And at that time I was thinking, boy, it seems like we've already had our heyday and we were on the down, this, sliding down. And I didn't realize that it would happen so quickly. And I can't help but thinking about that, especially as I'm looking at these Iranian pieces as, what has happened to our country? Man, oh man. But that's kind of like the overall general idea. But on the day-to-day basis, what I'm doing is I'm looking at these objects that I just absolutely adore and trying to analyze them. And by looking at things that I really like and then trying to emulate them or use them as a starting point, what I'm often doing is just really like luxuriating on all those curves and trying to understand the form and trying to understand what it is that I like about it, whether it's that curve of the belly or the curve of the back. And in this case, I didn't feel like I needed the stand on top, but then as you can see with my piece, it needed some more decorative elements. Oftentimes when I make a piece, I will make one and then I'll think like, oh, I have another idea. And so then I'll make another one. And so sometimes I work in series. Sometimes these series will, they're not sequential. I'll work on something, then I'll get distracted and make something else, but then I'll come back to that idea. So I have a number of these, of ibexes from different times, horses from different times. I wanted to show this piece to talk a little bit about color. Generally, I use clear or the translucent white plastic, like from plastic milk jugs. But in this case, this is all from green bottles. And a question that people often ask me is, where do I get my materials? And I get them anywhere. People save them for me. People give me plastic. They're, recycled plastic. I find some in my building. I find it on the street in Brooklyn. Friends, yeah, I get it from friends. The things that I use. In this case, though, I was walking home and I found two giant bags of large lemon juice bottles on the street. I have no idea why they were there. I have no idea who would use like two giant bags of lemon juice bottles, but it was a real find. And so the wheels on this cart are from the bottoms of those lemon juice bottles. And also in this picture, you can see that my process is really, really low tech. So I just cut the pieces apart with good shears and carve them with my utility knife. And I'm constantly like carving, building, taking parts away, and then rebuilding. It's not really a linear process. An object that I've been really interested in for quite a while are cylinder seals. And cylinder seals are about an inch tall. If you don't know what they are, they're about an inch tall, a cylinder, and they have a design carved in them. And that's what you see in these books here. And they would be used in Mesopotamia as a like as a signature for someone. So if someone bought a property or had a contract, they would take their cylinder seal, which they often wore as jewelry, and then they would roll it through a piece of mud, and then people would know that that belonged to that person. But the imagery on them is, I just find fascinating. So here you can see that leaping deer, and you can see part of the process, how it starts with looking at the pictures and books and doing the drawing, then building it, and then what ends up being the final piece. In this case, with the wood, I wanted to put it back, put the deer in the setting like where it was living. So by drawing through the spackle that's covering the wood on the base there, I felt like I was kind of bringing it back into that setting. And some of the imagery and the symbolism in the cylinder seals I find fascinating, like those bumps, which can be used in so many different formats, usually would symbolize mountains. One of the reasons I'm probably so interested in cylinder seals and in this gold cup is because my training is as a jeweler and metalsmith. And I had gone to grad school at SUNY New Paltz, and I would often drive down to the city on the weekends and go to the Metropolitan. And one of the things that I would always go and look at is this gold cup. And after looking at this piece for about 40 years, I finally decided that I should try and make it. So I kind of wanted, I had this idea that I wanted to take the gazelle off of the cup. And like all of these pieces, part of what I'm doing is I'm just looking so carefully at these things that I love and then thinking, how can I make that? Like what parts of the convex and concave shapes can I use to build something that will have some of that quality? And sometimes it doesn't really work very well. In this case, I realized as I was making it, even though I had all these drawings and I kept looking back to the original, my form was really, really long. So my process is not at all linear. In this case, I had to like cut the thing in half, put it back together, and then I realized that actually it needed to be kind of curved like the gazelle is on the cup. And then it still looked like it was missing something. So I gave it its own vessel with its own frieze of gazelles that I scratched into the magic sculpt. Another thing that is often really interesting to me is the way contemporary life seems to echo the ancient world. This ram bearer also was at the Metropolitan, and Sarah McLaren, posted this picture of her husband Mike carrying this goat through their flooded field on Christmas in 2020. And as we remember, 2020 was the pandemic, and there were floods, and there was probably wildfires. But I mean, thinking about the ancient world, I mean, that seemed like a really sort of biblical time. And so anyway, that connection between the past and the present, they seem to really, in this picture, it seemed to really conflate. And I had been looking at that piece and starting to make this when I saw that picture. So I was like, oh man, that's perfect. What I also learned in doing some more research on the ram bearer, I just assumed that he was carrying the ram for a sacrifice. But then I also found out that people would carry a ram around the perimeter of the city to ward off a plague. Also echoing our time. Another thing that I like about looking at these ancient pieces is looking at look at how naturalistic his face is. And that is something that I'm always sort of playing with. Like, I feel like the face on my figure, although I was emulating in this case fairly closely, at least for the top part, my face became more of an archaic kind of figure. And I'm always sort of somewhere in between that place of, am I making a piece that is based on a statue of a piece, or am I making a piece that is like a naturalistic thing? And it's something that I think about a lot, because frequently I'll see like a sculpture of a deer, and then I'll look at a lot of pictures of deer, and I'll look at actual deer and think like, wait, do I want it to look like a real thing, or do I want it to look like a piece of ancient art? sometimes the pieces that I'm looking at are very reduced and simplified, like in this amazing marble torso. Another piece at the Metropolitan that I look at all the time. One of the things that I loved about this is just the geometry of the form and the geometry of the hands and those very, very long fingers that are just described by those lines, and how those lines, to me, they seemed a lot like the fingers that you see in Egyptian sculptures. So just thinking about the relationship between different cultures and how we depict different forms throughout time and throughout culture, or a variety of cultures.
How many more slides do you have, Shari?
I have a few, but I can stop whenever. Is it time?
Well, I'm just trying to make room for everything to happen, so that's all.
Yes. Okay. I can flip through these real quickly.
Okay.
The myth of Zeus and Europa, I saw this piece on the internet, which led to that piece. And one of the things that I think is so fascinating about living in our time is that we can do so much research so easily. And in looking at the myth of Zeus and Europa, then I found all these other images that I then played with that idea of, is it moving forward through space or is it looking at us? I'll just flip through these last few pretty quickly. The idea of working serially. And then I'll end with this one, which was from an exhibit in 2024 at Art at King's Oak, which is run by Clara Weissem and a different Alex Cohen. But what I liked about this piece so much was that they made this beautiful display, and I felt like it was kind of putting my pieces kind of like how I see them frequently in a museum. And I thought that by seeing them that way, it kind of related back to that whole idea of who are we and how will we be perceived in the future, to the people that hopefully will come after us and wonder about the objects that we made.
Thank you, Shari. And now on to Nancy Cohen, who
Let's
has
hope.
her shareable material.
Let's hope.
I hope.
Me too. Can you see it now?
No, I see you.
You can't see anything?
I see you, and
Oh. Okay, I don't know. Okay, let's see. Back to Zoom.
Nancy, if you go to the bottom of the screen where you see the share button, do you see that on the bottom?
Absolutely. Yeah, but now
And
I
then
don't.
when you hit that, does your presentation come up with a green line around it?
Yeah, I got it
I think
now.
we have progress occurring here.
Okay.
I hope. More progress.
You see something?
Yep.
Okay. Thank God. Okay. On the top here is Mill Creek Marsh in Secaucus, New Jersey, in the Meadowlands. It was a forest hundreds of years ago and then became a saltwater marsh. And the tree stumps that are still there appear to be growing out of the water. And it's one of the most interesting, weirdest places I've ever seen. And I spent several years trying to capture what it felt like to be at that place. So the image on the bottom is an installation that I did for New Jersey City University, trying to create the feeling of being in the marsh and walking through the marsh and what it felt like to see these ancient tree stumps with piercing coming through ice and in different seasons. And I'm working with handmade paper and glass and wire. And when I had originally made this piece in my studio where I didn't have what is the back wall in this gallery. And when I saw the space, I realized, okay, there's another wall. And I started making the drawing on the right. I had never done anything like this before. It was the size of the wall was 10 feet tall by 8 feet wide. I made a piece of paper that size and I started drawing using paper pulp the elements of what it felt like to get to the site. So the piece on the image on the left is a close-up of the installation, and on the right, the first of what became an ongoing series I've been working on for maybe 13 years now, of large-scale handmade paper drawings that feel to me sculptural, even though they're flat. And I've been using them to talk about place and site in a way that was different than the way I could do it in my sculpture. So I make the paper, I join it together when it's wet, I dry it under weight, and then I use paper pulp to draw in a linear way on top of the surface of the paper. The installation traveled to 4 venues around the country, and the final one was at Urban Glass in Brooklyn, and there was a 15-foot wall. So this is the largest of those pieces I've made to date, and all handmade paper, and meant to feel, instead of like I was on my way between the marshes, as if I was trying to navigate myself around the marshes, using all different kinds of ways of using paper to create the imagery. There's also rubber and resin in that. So I've been thinking about sight, the memory of sight and the experience of sight, rather than depicting a particular thing. So on the left, another image based on a place on the Hackensack River, and on the right, Espiritu Santo. I had an experience to go with a small environmental group hiking in the mountains of Espiritu Santo National Park in Baja California. We climbed a mountain and came over to see, at the top of the mountain, to see the ocean with the sand and the water mixing. The tide was coming and they were mixing together, and it looked so much to me like the pictures I had seen of Spiral Jetty, that that became the image I felt like I really wanted to work with. So neither of these things are actual depictions, but more memories of feelings. In the piece on the left, there was actual rubber running into the river the day that I saw this site. These 2 pieces are both based on my experience being in mangrove forests, several times kayaking, and once in a boat that somebody was taking me through. And I find mangroves to be some of the most interesting sculptural forms I have ever seen. I can't believe what they look like and how they grow, but I'm also very moved by how they function and how important they are to our ecosystem, like what an unusual way they grow and how they become such an important filtration system to, try and keep our oceans clean and protect coral reefs and absorb toxins in the land. And when I've been around mangrove forests, sometimes you actually also even see trash, cluttering around those roots because everything is sort of getting suctioned into that space. So I'm drawn to how it functions and very much the kind of spindly, crazy way they grow. The piece on the left is more about moving through water and the experience of reflections and shadows and light cast on water rather than a particular place. But in the image on the right, this is a site very close to Newark Airport, right off the New Jersey Turnpike, where there are oil refineries in Linden, New Jersey. And if you get off the highway and you go there, it's a residential community and a factory town where people are living in the midst of this incredibly polluted environment. That little blue curvy line on the bottom of that drawing is Morse's Creek, which runs through both the residential community and the factories. But I've also, over the years, just been fascinated by the structures that you see off the turnpike and that orange light that is glowing out of those factories. I was like, what is that? So I'm drawn to this contrast between the kind of horror of some of our industrial production and then the elegance of it too. So during COVID, I spent a lot of time inside. My studio, fortunately, was in an empty building, so I was able to be there. But I was thinking a lot about what it felt to be inside and not to be able to go outside. In the piece on the left, the linear shapes on the top are sculptures that I had made that during that time. And the teardrop shapes coming down in that drawing were meant to evoke both tears and also the particles of the virus. I was thinking a lot about wings during that time because I was thinking about like the birds that I could hear outside and their wings, and the bugs that were flying in my studio, their wings. And then I was thinking about death and about the use of angels in art and how wings symbolize that. The drawing on the right is called Hand Song, which is a drawing based on the sculpture that you're going to see in a second. But if you can see me putting my hands together like this, I was trying to create wings by the joining of my hands at the heel. And I did this by melting. So I also work with glass, melting test tubes together, filling them with red pigment, and creating these forms that felt like wings, but also felt like hands reaching out or mouths opening to speak or to scream or to cry. But they were just like landing on the wall ever so delicately. I was also during that time, I guess, fairly obsessed with the idea of wings, and was making small winged shapes and hanging them from the ceiling in my studio. I made hundreds by the time COVID was over, and some of them were based directly on looking at images of birds and bugs, and some were based on looking at images of angels in art. And then at the end of COVID, I had the opportunity to show this piece in 2 floor-to-ceiling windows at the Visual Arts Center in Summit, New Jersey, along with an exhibition of my large-scale paper pieces. It's so far the only solo exhibition I've been able to have of this work. I've shown them in a few at a time in group shows, but it was so exciting to have my own room with all of this large work I've been working on for years, and to have on either end of the room these very delicate flying creatures. So there's a very strong relationship between my drawing and my sculpture. And I think you see it really clearly here on the left. This drawing was based on observations of a spider web, a very spindly web hanging on a dock over a body of water. And the sculpture on the right was inspired by the making of the drawing. So the sort of building the web in glass after having tried to build it in pulp. The sculpture hangs on the wall. And in my sculpture, I think much less, I'm still thinking about place, but much less specifically. It's not, oh, this memory of this place. But what I've been thinking about most recently is how our physical environment is collapsing, how the environment is collapsing, how we're being flooded, how, fires, floods, decay, and the idea of what could I do to sort of, in my fantasy, hold that back together and save it and sort of protect our land. So these are 2 sort of undulating, glass shapes with broken elements, and then a linear matrix of glass and wire, as if I could possibly stitch it back together. I made these glass shapes by fusing together found glass and then draping them over clay. And I usually, slumping them over clay, remove the clay. But I started thinking about, if I'm thinking about land collapsing, maybe the clay should stay as a stand-in for the land. So this piece is called Overflow, about flooding land. My very first glass pieces were 30 years ago. My grandmother died and I inherited some of her glass, and I started thinking about what was left when somebody died. And I ended up taking a hammer and breaking the glass, separating the cup of the glass from the stem of the glass, and gluing them back together, all the cups, all the stems, into sculpture. Which was very meaningful for me. And then this year, and have been working with found glass since, but this year, the mothers of 2 of my close friends died this year, and separately, they both gave me, not knowing the other had done so, their mother's glass. So this piece is made out of the glass in here. What I remelted a broken picture of my friend's mom. So the pieces feel like they're about collapse, but also regeneration and the passage of time, and giving meaning to things that had meaning, and then the meaning is gone, and creating a new meaning for them.
Would it be okay with you if we go on collectively rather than singularly? Would you be all right with that?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
So rather than
this
risk getting my knuckles wrapped for, quoting directly from somewhere, I'm going to sort of extrapolate something I read a couple of days ago. we know that plastic comes from petrochemicals. I mean, that's the root of plastic. So the whole exercise of using these legacy fuels, whether it's gas, whether it's coal, these are all things that are producing tremendous loss of health and some serious outcomes. So, for example, uh, when people died in 2024 and were and researchers looked at their brains and tried to get an idea of, why many of them had suffered from dementia or Alzheimer's. What they discovered was 7 grams of plastic in the average person that was deceased who had been studied. And that was up over a period of about 8 years prior by something like 50%. So we're entering into a period of time where a great amount of plastic and other chemical, traces and metals, I should add, are being found in people who have passed away. And because what makes this even more insidious is that because the profits in oil and gas, particularly in oil, have been challenged, and not simply by something like the Iran war, which is, hopefully a brief episode, but as a general trend, a lot of the profit because of electric cars and so on, and renewables, a lot of the profit that has been in oil is under attack. And one of the ways that the petrochemical companies are going to respond to this, are responding to it, is by upping their manufacture of plastics and specifically single-use plastics. And, this is going on globally. And at the same time, it turns out that most of the efforts to get people to recycle, recycling things that, not so much packaging, but other forms of plastic, bottles, cans, etc., is that's turning out to be something of a scam in that it really, I think I've seen numbers like 8 or 9% of all plastic waste actually gets recycled, and that may be better than zero, but it's still, there are these floating islands of plastic, particularly in the Pacific Ocean, huge, huge entities, almost like self-perpetuating entities. And of course, fish are eating a lot of plastic. Turtles, all sorts of life forms are eating a lot of plastic. So I wonder, just as a way of getting to us having a shared conversation, the three of you and myself, how does that make you feel in the context of the kind of art that you've been making, and also in the context of the lives of people who are viewing your art and humanity in general? How's that for a small question? Anybody want to bite?
I'll start just because
Okay.
I like talking about plastic. So the thing that I find ironic is that the petrochemical-based plastic that we're talking about here, so there are plastics that have predated petrochemical-based plastic that were much more environmentally friendly, but we
Right.
are now obsessed with it. And I remember reading about the story of John D. Rockefeller being on his oil field and seeing a fire burning off in the distance. And he said to his engineer, "What's that fire?" And the guy said, "Oh, we're just burning off some residue of the oil refining process." And John D. Rockefeller said, "I don't want to waste anything. Let's do something with that." And that is kind of
The birth of plastic.
yeah, the birth of the abhorrent amount of post-war 70 years of the abundance of plastic that we're now kind of living with and existing in. The other thing one last thing I'll mention is that floating plastic patch that exists. One of the things that they found out about that recently is it's started to develop its own ecosystem. So
Exactly.
apparently,
That's my point.
so there are things that we, by virtue of our unintentional kind of consequences on how we live on the planet, are responsible for kind of generating things that have never existed before in a way that is completely haphazard, that we have no control over, and we don't actually know how they will interact with everything else that has naturally occurred on this planet.
Generally speaking, not well.
Yes.
Someone else?
I just wanted to respond to what Anonda just said, because that's a little bit like the mold that you had to then drown in bleach, right?
To kill. Yes.
I would just add that it's a really grim situation and only getting grimmer and grimmer. And, this idea that we as individuals, which of course I do, religiously recycle all of my things and make sure that, everything is separated exactly as it should be. And that doesn't make any difference because, as you said, such a tiny bit of it is getting recycled. But the fact that we take on the blame, we take on the guilt, and then the whole political system is just completely, you know, doing whatever they want and denying
How
that
could
it's
you
any
say that,
problem.
Shari? I'm shocked.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm feeling grim about all of this these days.
Mhm. So, Nancy, what is the Atlas of Impermanence?
That was the name of the exhibition that had all of those drawings. And I feel like my work is always dealing in this idea of being on the edge of surviving and not surviving, both in the ideas that I'm thinking about and often in the materials that I use, kind of pushing them to the edge of existence. So it came from that. So sort of Atlas, in that it was this grouping of this work and all in different ways about the idea of being on the edge of being there and not.
So this is the Atlas as an Atlas shrugged, something along those lines?
No, like an atlas with a book of maps.
Oh, literally a book. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Like here's my collection of things that are on the edge.
uh-huh. So there is an awful lot of poisoned water, ground, and air, and that's sort of a sidebar to the same um, philosophy. Let's call it, economic philosophy of disposing of things. Disposable culture, disposable clothing, disposable, materials, uh, computers that die in about 3 years, and that sort of thing. And it's grim.
I going back to what you were talking about before, I had an
Okay.
experience in Samana Bay in the Dominican Republic. I was there with an environmental group, and the water there had been so damaged that people could only drink bottled water. So the amount of plastic was like more than you've ever seen, because everybody had to buy all of their water to drink, because
Yeah.
not, so, and then there were these giant just jugs of water absolutely everywhere, because the waterways were just completely full of garbage and
Uh-huh.
the runoff. So like plastic in that case was like the savior to keep those people alive in some crazy way. Sorry. But it's really complicated. It's all
Yeah.
integrated mess.
It is indeed complicated. Let's see where we are here. Let's try to take some comments and questions from our audience. I'm willing to bet there are a few.
Oh,
And just unmute yourself and speak, whoever you are.
I'm gonna pipe up. Hi, guys. I was so excited to see this was happening tonight. So I have and everyone, just such beautiful work. I've always loved all of your work. Shari, I have a couple of technical questions. One, how are you creating the surfaces on the plastic? What are you doing to the plastic after you're putting it together? Or is the magic sculpt hot glue method, is that creating it too? How are you creating those beautiful surfaces that you have going?
So after I get the form that I want, I then coat the pieces with acrylic mediums usually, like matte medium, gloss medium, all those different products. And I mix pigments in, or sometimes I mix mica powders in. Sometimes I sprinkle powders on top. Sometimes I use glass powder or glass frit on top of them. So it's so like a whole other process after I get the form that I want to then get the surface that I want. And usually it involves a lot of putting thin layers over it and then, frequently sanding them down or building them up until I get something that seems
I
right
hope
for the
you're
form.
masking and gloving and ventilating.
Yeah, I do mask when I use the powders, but the other materials are like, matte medium. They're not too
Yeah,
bad.
that's not bad.
Yeah.
No,
But
I
for
So
when,
use it
yeah, if I'm
myself.
sprinkling the glass powders, I do.
you're not sanding the plastic, are you, in any way?
Not much.
Okay.
It's
Because
very, it's
that
minimal.
stuff, well, I was just thinking about, you guys were talking about that the whole thing with the microplastics are this huge thing as well. So not only
Right,
do we have
right.
the big patch, but they're finding I can't remember what the percentage is in the brain of microplastics.
The
Uh,
equivalent of a plastic spoon in the
well,
average brain.
yeah, it's a lot, and we don't know what effects obviously it's having on humans. But at any rate, so wear a mask when you sand this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do.
And the sculpt, the magic sculpt, that is like it's like a hot glue gun. You just put the same, it comes the same way.
No, no, it's
Yeah, is
a
there any off-gassing when you're doing that, something like that?
no, no, I don't think so. It's a two-part moldable epoxy, and I wear gloves
Um,
now when I do it. Um,
Oh, okay.
but it's a really great, strong material, and it helps to hold everything together.
uh-huh. It's like
Okay.
sculpt metal or whatever that was, remember?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, there's a bunch of those different products, epoxy sculpt, or
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
there's a number of them.
I'm just always looking for different things to glue to glue elements together quickly.
Yeah,
So it's
there's
just
two things I like, the Magic Sculpt, and then there's also a product called Magic Smooth. You should check them both out. They're great for holding things together.
Mhm.
okay. Great. Thank you.
Any
Hmm.
other questions out there among our our amassed audience? Okay. Um, have we exhausted this subject?
No,
I
I, me,
could
I
go on
always
for
have,
I'll ask a
seconds.
I
question.
know, I always have questions. Well, if no one's going to jump in, I'm going to jump
I'll
in.
jump.
Here you have it.
Go ahead, Bev.
Um,
Well, hang on. Let's see if there's anybody else that
oh,
wants to. Steve, go ahead.
Um, I can't remember if it was in this forum or another one that we were talking about your approach, the artist's approach using certain materials, plastics in particular, um, and where you were on the activist versus the observer divide. I mean, do you consider yourselves activists, and is that why you know, Sherry in particular, why you use this medium, or is it just a medium that's convenient for you?
I guess I don't really think of it as a divide. I think of it as they kind of coexist in a way. And because I'm an artist and I'm the amount of plastic that even though, if you look at my studio, it seems like I have like, all the plastic in the world in here. I have a lot of it. But still I'm an artist. So the amount of plastic that I'm using is not really making a dent, and I'm very aware that I'm not making a dent at all. But, if you're making sculpture, it has to be made out of something. So I feel like at least I'm um, using things that already existed. So I'm not, going out, and I used to buy big sheets of plastic before I was doing this body of work, and I felt horrible about that. So on a personal level, I feel at least like I'm not creating that much more waste, and hopefully I'm making things that have more value. But I think as a real activist, I would be probably living my life very differently. And I guess I consider myself an artist with a concern for the environment.
Steve, back in the cave days, the one Neanderthal would say to the other, "Why are we making this beautiful little object here? We could be making arrowheads." Okay,
Okay.
that one landed a little flat. Wrong
Yeah.
trajectory.
Well, I'm glad they did.
Yeah, I mean that they made the objects. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Anyone else?
I just like to say how much I really enjoyed all three of your presentations. And uh, Shari, I met you so long ago. I don't know
Mm.
if you remember meeting me.
Yeah, of
You were
course.
doing such different work, and it was when you started doing these, I was just fell in love with this work.
Oh,
And
thanks.
Anonda too, I've known forever, and Nancy, I've really known forever. I mean, I think you were one of the first people I met when I moved to Jersey City. So, and I've followed your work too. So everybody has had all these iterations and moving in these directions. And anyway, it was a wonderful group. Putting you guys together. It was a wonderful group. So I was happy to see that.
I wanted to say that when they contacted me and said, "Do you want to do this with Shari and Anonda?" I'm like, "Yes, who had that brilliant idea?" And now I know. So thank you.
You're quite welcome. When I started thinking about artists I wanted to see, all your names came up, and there you have it.
Well, thanks.
Alex, it's yours.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for a great panel. And please join us next Monday, April 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for an engaging dialogue between artist James Recco and curator Michael Klein. And thank you so much, Anonda, Shari, Nancy, and Doug. And thank you to all of our board members and volunteers. And good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.